it's less about PowerPoint presentations and more about conversations. You can get a lot more done. You can build a lot more rapport with your stakeholders with less formal presentations and documents and artifacts, rather than just a frank discussion about what's important, why it's important, and how the security risk and business resilience organizations can support those needs.
This is a Security Weekly production. Security Weekly is a resource of Cyber Risk Alliance.
The Cybersecurity Collaborative is proud to present CISO Stories. Each week, CISO Stories takes a deep dive on security leadership with one of the contributors to my latest book, the best-selling CISO Compass: Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers, as well as other top CISOs and industry security leaders. The Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/CSC or visit cyberleadersunite.com. I'm your host, Todd Fitzgerald, and this week we welcome Darin Hurd, EVP and CISO at Guaranteed Rate.
Having been in technology now for a number of years, I started with servers and desktops and networks, and I think the intrigue of the technology started there, but it in that path along my career, it started to pivot into security. I think the first thing happened is I was a consultant, and we had a client, and the CEO's email was hacked, and this was years and years ago. And we were asked to do a security assessment, and with my background in all things infrastructure, ended up doing a security assessment with some other colleagues at the time. So this would have been early 2000s, and so I think that's when that project, that assessment, first intrigued me and kind of tipped me in the way of looking into more of cybersecurity as a profession. And over the years, did a bunch of different projects, but ended up coming back when an opportunity presented itself when I got out of consulting into a client that hired me. And part of the overall responsibility for that role was security. And I had the opportunity to help build a security team from more or less the ground up. And as they say, the rest is history. And I've stayed in cybersecurity ever since. So that's been about 10 years or so.
Wow. So that's a very fast track to get into a conversation with the CEO, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. As I think as people have probably said at some point, don't always take advantage of a crisis, and it's an easy way to have a crisis, help to manage that crisis, and use that to get into the security field.
Yeah, I've also worked for some executives that they've been very concerned about things like securing their house, and that's just another opportunity to help them out. And some of them had cameras all over the place, or some of them were even off the grid. It didn't use credit cards and were very concerned about being hacked. So today we're going to talk about building high-performing security, risk management, and business resilient teams. So start us off with this. What makes a high-performing team?
I think in a few words, it's velocity and outcome. So at the end of the day, those teams, security, business resilience, in governance, risk compliance, they all have a purpose, and that purpose and that outcome differs. And if those teams are aligned with the business on the outcomes they're trying to achieve, and they're working at a fast pace to achieve those outcomes, and that's when you can do some really cool stuff on behalf of the business.
What are some of those outcomes that that you need to get alignment with?
I tend to try to stay away from the technology talk, the mechanic talk, if you will, when talking to stakeholders. So we look at the value we provide as an organization, and especially around the security team. We focus on 5 key themes. First and foremost, of course, it's risk reduction. We're trying to reduce the probability of something happening. And we're also trying to reduce that impact should it happen. I think that's one of the, if not the primary reasons the security teams exist. But if you start to dive into that more, there's other value adds, there's other outcomes we achieve in addition to risk reduction. We're a great organization to help reduce friction in employees, in customers' everyday lives. Authenticating to technologies, and a good example of that. When you're having to put your username and password every single app you use, it causes a lot of friction. So if you can remove that, it's a good thing, and reduce risk around those processes. And then the others around improving operational efficiency. Security can add steps, add controls, but also can do it in a way that is transparent, reduces friction, improves operational efficiency in the process. And then the last 2 focus on enabling compliance. I think all businesses have a role to play and have some compliance obligations. And then the last is generate revenue. So when we focus on what the outcomes we're trying to achieve, we tend to align with those 5 themes.
How does security help us generate revenue? I think that's one of the more difficult challenges that a lot of organizations have is showing that, because we're typically seen as that cost center.
Yeah. So the way we look at it is directly, we're a cost center. We're not a separate revenue stream. We're not selling products or services to our customers in the mortgage business that I'm in. But where we can enable the revenue generation is around digital trust. If you think of us, each of us as consumers, we're more likely to buy from companies that we believe are protecting and looking out in our best interest and protecting our digital assets. So in a mortgage business, which the team and I operate in, that's really important information, like your W-2 forms, your tax returns, bank statements. And when you're dealing with a company that has that information, building that digital trust behind the scenes, it's with the controls and the processes and the technology that we have as part of our security program, and then marketing that some of those capabilities to our customers can help to build that digital trust. And there's several studies done on consumers and where they will spend money, and they tend to spend money with companies that they believe have their best interests at heart, and in practice as it relates to the assets they're protecting.
I know ISACA has really taken on the digital trust is their tagline. Really, they actually renamed one of their conferences to Digital Trust World, which was their former CACS conference, and then the ISACA conference. And we did a podcast not too long ago with Christos from ISACA, talking about building that strategy as well. So how do you get these teams to collaborate with each other when they have different focuses?
Yeah, I think we've worked towards a model that's worked for us over the years, where it's enabled the impactful outcomes on behalf of the business as well as a higher velocity. And the first thing we start with is, to no surprise, is you need to have an aligned vision and strategy of where you're going to go. And that's not just within the team itself, but also in your business stakeholders. And in my case, that's a lot around operations, compliance, legal, HR, privacy. And what we do is we have built out a multi-year vision of what our capabilities are and where they should be with those stakeholders. And then the team and I work on how do you translate the capabilities that we need as a business to enable the digital trust, to support compliance, to reduce friction, et cetera. And we translate that really where the rubber meets the road is around objectives and key results. And the objectives and key results is a way to align your execution with your strategy. It's nothing, obviously, that I created. It's been around for years and years. But what we do is we sit down with each of the teams, and for each team in engineering and ops and identity and access management, business resilience, et cetera, each year we align on and describe high level, very aggressive objectives that we're going after. So as an example, one of the key objectives we have for the identity and access management team this year is to introduce passwordless authentication to the enterprise. And there's a number of results that we need to work through to get there. So that will be an example, a high level objective, and then we'll break that down into what are the key results that we need to have to achieve that objective, and then how does that align, or how does that play out over the course of the year? Are we going to front load it in the beginning of the year? Do we need to spread this out across the year? And then so those key results then will be articulated, documented, and sequenced as a part of our overall strategy.
The article this podcast is based upon can be viewed in the best-selling cybersecurity leadership book, CISO Compass, Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers. So you talked about the nuances of collaboration. What do you mean by that?
When we work with our stakeholders, the way we engage them is, I think, fundamentally different than a lot of other companies that I'm aware of. We tend to not talk about the technology. We tend to not talk about the details of the how. What we focus on is what's the business benefit from the objective that we're kind of putting on the map, if you will. That risk reduction, that reducing friction, et cetera. And the way we facilitate those discussions is less formal. It's more informal through discussion of where does the compliance team need to go? Where do we have within our business projects that are going to improve the customer experience? And through those discussions, I think we tease out what's the business need as well as what we want to provide. And those conversations help to align on those objectives and key results for the year.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that looking at what the business needs versus what security needs to fill that role.
Yeah, I think that the other thing I'd add to that, it's less about PowerPoint presentations and more about conversations. You can get a lot more done. You can build a lot more rapport with your stakeholders with less formal presentations and documents and artifacts, rather than just a frank discussion about what's important, why it's important, and how the security risk and business resilience organizations can support those needs.
So how do you get everybody on board with business resilience and what that means, and making those trade-offs and those decisions, which may go against what the organization wants to do for efficiency, but is necessary for business resilience?
Yeah, it's identifying where you can overwhelm them with value. I'll use that phrase. And what I mean by that is, we've all probably been involved in, from one perspective or another, around business resilience, around helping to answer questions around building out a business impact analysis or business continuity plan. Where we've been more effective historically has been identifying where the team can add additional value in those conversations that we need to have. So give you an example. When we do our tabletop exercises, we do them with each department. A lot of companies do that. What we do also is we use that as a training opportunity to actually go through the BIAs and the BC plan in a very informal way that generates the conversation around how the processes work today, and then how they might be impacted in the event of some type of disaster. Now, where there's additional value we provide is the company I work with has a number of partnerships, and those partnerships are all in a similar business, but sometimes do things a bit differently. And we're in a unique position to identify where each of those companies do essentially the same thing, but a different way, and how we can bring those managers, those stakeholders together in facilitating conversation that says, these two companies do it one way, these three companies do this process a different way. There's an opportunity to simplify, to consolidate, to create efficiencies. And that happens in the process of doing, within business resilience, these tabletop exercises where we're going through a simulated disaster.
So those have been received very well. And who do you have engaged in these tabletop exercises?
I have a teammate that runs them on behalf of the business resilience program. And he does a phenomenal job of creating an agenda, creating an environment with key managers who know the business process well, and working through a tabletop exercise in a way that's fun and enlightening. And it's I think people actually look forward to these from time to time. And I think that's creating that environment and that level of engagement is what helps to facilitate the right types of conversations happening, whereby the business resilience team can add more value than just checking a box off of a tabletop exercise.
How do you, at the end of the day, how do you assess whether your strategy is innovative and your team is performing at a high level?
I think I'd answer that in two ways, Todd. The first is on the velocity. We keep a number of, we use agile principles for each of the teams, which I think is somewhat unique, but not exclusively. And through that, we measure the work, the stories that get done every couple weeks, and the trends of that velocity. And so that helps us to see, with the given capacity we have, what's the outcome, the stories that we're completing every 2 weeks. And we collect metrics on that process that help inform us to where we need to make changes. So as an example, some of the teams tend to take in work in the middle of the sprint, which then diverts them through the goals that they need to accomplish. And ultimately, we have a limited capacity. We need to focus on the goals, the objectives that we've established. And so diverting off of that goal is problematic. And so as we take stories on in the middle of the sprint, that's an opportunity for us to say, hey, we can probably more focus our time and attention and plan a little bit better. So that's some good feedback. On the second part of the strategy, as far as the innovation, I think one of the things that we look at is, like a lot of others, is what are our peers doing? In my case, the financial services industry and mortgage. Are we leading around the different themes, the risk reduction, the reducing friction, and enabling compliance and whatnot? In some areas, that's very difficult to measure, to have some awareness around. But others, as an example, around reducing friction, we know that there's some capabilities that we have that we built on the authentication, the registration of user accounts, the authentication of user accounts that differentiate us in the marketplace a bit more than our competitors. And so that's a gauge of how we try to stay with, as a leader in our case, a leader in experience for our borrowers, as it relates to some of the programs we're operating.
Makes sense. Well, this has been great, Darin. What sort of final advice would you give our listeners, whether they be emerging CISOs, current CISOs, experienced CISOs, as they're trying to build high-performing teams?
I think one of the things that we focused on is don't talk shop, don't talk about the technology. I think you've actually heard me say this before, is if you've ever watched the movie Fight Club, one of the key lines is, first rule of Fight Club is don't talk about Fight Club. Part of what I joke about is the first rule of security is don't talk about security. And really there's somewhat practicality with that statement, but the reality is that when you're talking to your colleagues in different departments who have a stake in what you're doing, going through the nuts and the bolts and the technology in detail is not something that they value as much. That's why we tend to focus on the themes of risk reduction, removing friction, enabling compliance. And so the language, I think, for the team itself, when they're engaging across the enterprise and the management team, and anyone involved in my organization, the language we use to focus on those themes is extremely important for getting our message across and better engaging others. So I think that's something I've continually leaned on over the years, as language is important. Don't talk shop. Let's keep it to the language of our customers.
I think that's great advice. Thanks a lot, Darin, and thanks for taking the time today. Visit more CISO Stories podcasts on securityweekly.com, where you will find an index of prior episodes. The Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/CSC or visit cyberleadersunite.com.